led up to stolen legacy. What it is that brought about the ancient Egyptian philosophy of God, the concept of God? What is it that brought the ancient Egyptian concept of theology to explain the theosophy? Was it an experience from a supernatural being coming from outer space, as most of us tend to believe in a hocus pocus? Was it some god that fly over some part of Egypt and said, "Come here," and got up on top of some hill and passed down a tablet or something? Was it any of that? No, none whatsoever. It was science. The ancient African used science as the foundation for religion. And I guess I should remove the word religion from that. As found in the documents, the ancient Africans in their writings dealt with the first concept of God. The first concept, the universe and all there is in it. All explanation of the totality. This is the reason we start to talk about the universe in terms of a circle. But the ancient African faith at the center, that thing about which the universe, that became this circle, the universe, was that which contained everything. And the ancient African said that within this circle, there are 4 quadrants. They didn't use the word quadrant as the English word, of course. But in the center of these 4 quadrants in this circle, there is a centroid axis. And the Africans, the ancient Africans, projected this. And from that projection, and if you carry that to its extent, you will come back again. This projection will be equal to that projection. But if you take this, let's take this, or take this, and we have this. Let's move this up, and we have that. Let's separate them. It's one pyramid and another pyramid. The angle doesn't change. It is out of this, and the projections of this that the ancient. But did this come from Egypt? Not at all. We see this in southern Africa among the Grimaldi's. Go to the museum in the New York Museum of down there at 7 foot on Central Park West. And you see the Grimaldi, they were there. But what is the difference? You still have the point of it. This is the secondary point, that is the secondary point, that is the secondary. It's still going to give you, the 4 quadrant is still going to give you the pyramidal sign. But did we break this down? It is here that the original concept came. that God is the center of the universe. And God, as the ancient called, was Ra. R-A. Why R-A? Translate R-A into English. R will be O-R is equal to the radius. God sees and commands all that God sees. And that's what the Greeks would call it the mysteries. But the ancient Africans equally went further and said what? A, B, and C. And out of that developed A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And all other types of algebraic calculation. And that was the mystery. When the Greeks came to Egypt, as a matter of fact, before they even came, when they were on the island of Summer, when they were learning from the ancient Africans in lodges established by the ancient Africans, they could not understand this to be logical thing. If you drop a plumb back from here, we saw the God here, I would always say Tahuti, the God of measurement and the God of recording every event. There was nothing superfluous to him. There was nothing extraordinary to them. The ancient Africans were so acquainted with their tradition, acquainted what was the ordinary day of life for the common priest. Mathematics was not surprising to them. They had mastered mathematics. And because they master mathematics, they master religion. They master the concept of the human feeling against. Those, the ancient Africans, when they did this, they equally introduced something which the Europeans cannot conceive up to now. They show you the feather of truth, justice. As it's called today.
It's a con artist.
An Ethiopian ostrich feather, again symbolically, the heart soul. The heart soul. And they put an eye here, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Dealing with the heart. The ancient Greeks couldn't deal with this. And therefore, they eventually put the symbols of existence, an arrow. They had to have violence going through that heart, just as they have violence in terms of our love making. Even the lullabies up to now that the present Europeans sing, Rockabye Baby on the treetop. When the treetop baby, the baby can drop and break into two. And Humpty Dumpty on the wall, get a damn ball and bust up. You know, even the little rhymes for the little children go wind up into, murder or something. So they couldn't think of this kind of thing. The ancient Africans, from this, it is from this the ancient Africans used to conceive the possibility of God. In translation out of this came another aspect that the Africans see. Now we have the circular shape here, we have the circular shape here. And when we're talking, the ancient Africans started to devise methods by finding these chords. What did they mean? Out of this, the Africans did more. He reversed this and did this, defining the strength of things around him. Most of you young men are in engineering. It's not only for making a dollar, so you could buy a B and G or a G or D or something like that. These are spiritual dimensions. The ancient Africans did these. The movement factors here to your maximum were the ancient Egyptians. Excuse me for those of you who don't deal with strength of material and so forth, that you may not understand, but you're supposed to understand it. What do you mean you don't understand? You're an African, you're supposed to understand it. My mother said I couldn't go. Well, that was enough. It meant I couldn't go. And then I asked my father when it was all over, why couldn't I go? And he said I was not a Christian, it was a Christian funeral. I said, but I know Renan, we were in the same class. And the kid that kicked him was a fellow Christian and he died. My father's statement of his to me was that his God is different to my God. I started to think then, because I thought that all men, they said, it's a difference in philosophy. All men believe in a common God. So then I asked another question, why is God here, Jehovah, God there, Christianity, Christ, and God there, Allah, but no goddess? And I said, yet, God over here has a woman who is the godmother. God over here has a woman who gave birth to him, and she is his mother, and God over here at Muhammad.
So anyhow, what he's doing is placing emphasis on how woman
at God having a mother who is never proclaimed, but is mentioned,
is neglected in terms of her rights, or not her rights, but in terms of who she is. You know, when you look at God, like obviously a God can only come from a female God, but what he's about to talk about is how, you know, the gods that they were identifying were always male, you know, and it wasn't about the female giving birth to a male. It was about like these guys that identified as God without their mothers being identified as a God.
The man gave birth to a child, a girl child, a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he has given birth to God and no help of a woman. And then I looked at men, including myself, and noticed that a man has no provision to give birth, even if he's a faggot. Have no provision made to give birth to anything. That when he's urinating, he's having trouble sometimes. So I had to ask myself eventually, it was bothering me all the time, I eventually asked myself, how could a man give birth to a child? There are fellows trying to prove it to me all the time, but I can't see it. They're switching and doing all kind of thing. But they haven't been able to deal with it. And no minister, no rabbi, and no imam have I asked to tell me where and who is God. Where can I find God to go and explain to him my problem? And I ask any of you to tell me realistically, what did God do for you? Don't tell me something you dream about. Tell me something that I could see. Don't tell me what you heard, what you believe. I want to see the actual fact. And not one of you here can do that. Not one. If you're a minister, you can't do it. If you're a bishop, you can't do it. If you imam, you wear
I
black
bet
and
you the
white
entire
pink and
motherfucking
green,
world
you
on
can't
that
do it.
bitch.
God is a factor that none of us have ever seen. Now, many of you say that you believe in God. I bet you can't show me God. And get me, you can't prove to me there's such a thing as God. You tell me what you believe. I don't want to damn what you believe.
Okay, so now what he's doing is he's kind of it's sort of an innuendo, because he knows that, for one, God is a feminine power, and the only male that can be considered a God is that she produces Y chromosomal atom, and he also knows that it only comes from one bloodline, but he knows no one knows that. He knows that they're not able to factor in all the parts. These teachers manipulate the mind because they know that you're not able to factor in all the parts. They make sure that you cannot say, okay, all of mankind roots from one common ancestor. That's mitochondrial Eve. Obviously, that's the bloodline of Christ. So when they're talking about African history and Egypt and gods like Ra, sun gods, and Amun, God of the South, they want to make sure that you cannot factor in that those are things that took place once physics was in the hands of the wrong people. This is during Satan's rule. This is after they stole dominion from that bloodline. Pharaohs had corrupt DNA codes. All these things that are in history have corrupt DNA codes. They're products of eugenics.
You could believe all kind of things, but prove it. Where is God? Where he come from? And if God made the world, where was God when he was making the world? If he made it, it doesn't exist, right? And he got to be some place to make it. I ask you, where was God when he made the world? You can't tell me a single place because you're telling me about the world. Have you ever given those things a thought? You never. You believed in God primarily, either your mother or some guardian or the other, or your father, told you about God, and you see other people believing in that, and you...
He said that you begin to believe because if you don't, they'll embarrass you. That's what religion is. They force a false belief on you.